right, good.
Right.
So let me actually continue with the intro. So we're actually this is the inaugural episode of the new series we're doing called Scripted with AppScript. And the idea is that we will demonstrate interesting, creative ways you could hook AppScript up with other ecosystems within Google and outside of Google. And we actually did a bunch of this last quarter as well with BigQuery, Analytics, Twilio, Salesforce, a bunch of different APIs. So we're going to call it Scripted, and you'll know that when that tagline comes up, you'll expect to see the AppScript team along with folks from the other products that we have. And the folks that don't know, Ikai Lan is now on YouTube.
I am on YouTube now. That's why you haven't been seeing me on these shows. By the way, Arun was just talking about some of the shows we did a couple months ago.
Yep.
And I highly recommend the Twilio and Salesforce shows. Those are both very good shows. And Salesforce, especially if you're using Salesforce and Google Apps in your organization, this is something that we see a lot.
Yep.
Because a lot of times you see organizations, they pretty much, when they go cloud, they go all cloud.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a really good mix, and you'll see that Arun doing a bunch of integration between Salesforce and Google Apps. So definitely check that show out if you've never seen it yet.
Yep, great. So, thanks for the plug.
But I'm on YouTube team now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So YouTube, people know it as a great content platform, fun, informative, just fun. Whimsical with cat videos. The sort of the canonical example of how to waste time. So what do developer relations do with YouTube? So
on YouTube, we don't want people just to think of us as a destination site. We want people to think of YouTube as a content platform. So YouTube, we do provide video hosting, but we really want the value of YouTube to be video discovery and to just find and learn and explore new things. Now, we joke about cat videos, but YouTube is an absolutely killer resource for when you want to learn something new. Right? Like for me, before YouTube, I would go to a cooking website and someone would say saute, and I go, I don't know what that means, right? So I have to go look at what saute means. After YouTube, I just kind of copy him and,
So you start your discovery through YouTube.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as a content author, are there things that YouTube offers that make the development APIs important?
There are. So we're trying to we're looking at ways that we can expose functionality from the YouTube site to developers so that you could programmatically manage your, what we call channels and your content.
Gotcha.
So right now we have the YouTube Data API, which lets you upload videos, post bulletins, just manage things, and that's really nice.
Right.
In addition, we recently launched the YouTube Analytics API. Which is very cool because YouTube has this function called Analytics that allows you to go in and see who's watching my videos, where are they from, what are their general age groups, and we try to infer this data and let you know this is when you added 5,000 subscribers, this is when you lost 1,000 subscribers, maybe you were posting too many videos, what's the average minutes that people watch your videos, right? That's a very useful metric because you want to know, are people watching your whole video, should it be shorter, should it be longer, and in addition, we also have the Android SDK, which allows you to do in-app videos, whereas before you would have to use a web view and an iframe. And now the experience is much nicer, and you'll see this on apps like BuzzFeed. We did a show with them a few weeks ago. Flipboard, and a few other pretty cool Android apps. So what we do in YouTube Developer Relations is we talk to these companies that anybody that wants to do cool things with video. So this could be mobile apps. We work a lot with game companies. So you play a game and you want to show your sweet moves in your game, whatever, right? You automatically upload YouTube, so very cool stuff. So that's what we work on.
Got it. So I'm actually going to put the just the documentation site. So what are some of the things that the developers should be really looking at? So on the YouTube.com, the developers.google.com/YouTube site, you can see that there's a bunch of services. So what are some of the highlights that folks should really get excited about?
So folks should be looking at the core of everything is the YouTube Data API, and we really want to encourage people to use version 3. It's tagged experimental, but that's because we're still trying to bridge some of the feature gap, and we're going to be filling in.
So it's pretty stable. Maybe there are some gaps.
Right. There's a couple of things that you can't quite do yet in version 3. We're still trying to identify these things and make sure that you can do everything you can do in version 2 in version 3. Version 3 is based on, it uses OAuth 2 for authentication, and it's based on our new API infrastructure.
Got it.
So this is the infrastructure that serves off the API console, where you would go to register, say you want to use BigQuery or the calendar API, and you toggle these things on. So it uses that infrastructure. Very cool stuff.
That's great.
In addition, the other API you want to care about is the YouTube Analytics API, which uses the same authentication infrastructure. So especially for people that are doing stuff with version 2 right now, I think it's really important to move to version 3 because you use the same authentication, and you can essentially recycle that same authentication code between the V3 data API and the V1 Analytics API. So don't get too confused there.
Got it.
All of our new APIs for YouTube are going to be using OAuth 2.
Okay.
OAuth 2 and JSON.
Cool.
Yeah.
And JSON's great because AppScript, bringing it back into AppScript, it's all JavaScript, and JSON just becomes very quickly a native object that we can build and integrate with various APIs that AppScript provides, very quickly iterate through these objects and be able to update a spreadsheet or a calendar or a lot of interesting things that we'll hope to demonstrate very quickly.
AppScript also parses XML, right?
It does. Yeah, XML is a first-class item, but I prefer JSON. I'm a little lazy when it comes to parsing things, and if I can just say JSON.parse and pass it a string, that to me wins over building a lot more complex parsing algorithms that the XML services require. So what we'll do is actually we'll dive into and kind of talk through some of the examples that we had kind of cooked up for this session. The hope is that at the end of it, you'll see interesting capabilities where the data comes from the YouTube data API and the analytics API, and then you can do something very cool and useful from the apps side of things. So apps means Gmail, calendar, spreadsheets, and so on. And there's actually a few folks that have done some interesting things with the YouTube API already. The first one that I think is noteworthy is this example library here by James Ferreira. You can find this very easily. Just search for James Ferreira script examples. I think is sort of the label that he uses. And you can find it here, and you can open an issue with him if there are any questions. But what they've done is sort of taken the V2 API of the YouTube API, the V2 version, and sort of wrapped it around and created a service. So they can say YouTube app.getStandardFeed, YouTube app.getUserUploads. I think there's a slight typo in this example. It's capital T and uppercase A, I've noticed. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking through it. But James does share the entire source code as well, so you can take a look at it and get started with it. But for most of the demos today, we're going to be using the V2 version, which I think is interesting and exciting. And we'll kind of get started with that. So the first example, Ikai, that I thought would be interesting is a lot of things that we do with the Google developers videos is very sort of time-based, right? So on Wednesdays, I think a team in the APAC Android team does a video. On Tuesdays and Fridays, the Drive team does videos. So I figured it would be a nice way to kind of take the data from those playlists, the video data, and then plot it on a calendar.
Okay.
So we'll get started with that example. So the first thing that Ikai kind of mentioned this already is that you have to create an API project because we're going to be using OAuth 2 and the API tokens from there. And I've logged into a sample account. All the keys that I'll create will be thrown away, so you should be able to use it. I'll go ahead and start create. We'll call this YouTube project. And I'm going to see that there is a simple API token, and we'll kind of get started with that. Okay, so I'm going to go to my script.google.com and start with a blank project. And what we're going to do is I have some pre-built samples because I think this is a lot of typing to do. And I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to copy my code. Everything will be shared, of course, as always. This code will be up on GitHub shortly after. I'm going to copy that API key here. I'm going to call this calendar GDL calendar. And we'll call this create GDL calendar. Okay? And as you can see that what this does is it uses the V3 version of the activity stream and then looks through the channel that I was able to determine the channel ID for the Google Developers account. I think for now I'm using the last 20 items, and then I'm just sort of filtering based on ones from yesterday onwards to kind of keep it a little bit more succinct. But then you can really kind of batches through and do a lot of interesting things. The key sort of point here is line number 5, which is URL fetch. So URL fetch, if you're not familiar, is actually one of the very prominent ways that you use to integrate AppScript with other systems. So it's actually your friend. It allows you to do a lot of interesting things, including OAuth 1 baked in. For OAuth 2, you do have to do a little bit more of the callback handling, but that's actually really straightforward once you set it all up. And then you can actually send posts and do all sorts of interesting things with it, with a lot of sort of add-ons that we provide. So in this example, I'm going to get that, and then this is the line I was saying. Line number 7, I now have a JavaScript object that I can just do dot notation on and iterate through all the items in an array, and really very straightforward to get started. And you can see that all I'm doing here is creating a calendar called the GDL calendar, getting the data for that particular playlist, or that channel I should say, and for each item I'm creating an event in that calendar. And at the very end, I'm going to create a link that I can kind of publish or just have myself up on a big board somewhere. And this is a very simple one-time function that I've written, but you can see that you could write this to kind of run on a trigger and see if you find new things, email me and alert me and all sorts of good things. I'm going to save this and run it. It's going to make me authorized. It's always something that is typical of an AppScript app. You have to give it some identity and some privileges. I'll run this. So this is going to take a few seconds. It's going to create a calendar for you dynamically. It's going to get the response back, parse it, and then iterate through it and create, I think, at least 20 different items. And then for now, I don't have any UI. If I go to the logger, I have this URL that if I pop open in a new window, should give me something that's quite useful. So hopefully you guys can see that on the monitor. So you can see that there's state of the script that we did last week, and we 2 weeks ago and uploaded it. There's the GDL women-focused hangout that we did, one for maps and Drive SDK and so on.
And if you included today, there would have been a lot of interesting shows. I know that for those of you that are watching this right now, go to developers.google.com/live. There are a lot of special shows. Yeah, there are a lot of special shows that you should check out. A lot of very cool things happening today that we announced.
Excellent. Yeah, I actually did filter it out because it was too many items to show, I thought. But this is an interesting way that you can keep up with your GDLs. This doesn't have to be GDLs. It could be an episode that you watch on the internet that you're tracking, or a music video launch, or whatever.
The only thing that I will point out is that one thing I noticed is that you did this for videos in the past, right? So you're adding items to calendar in the past. Right. So
you could theoretically schedule for, have it run every day and check for events that are happening on the day of. And if you have it scheduled ahead of time, I think you can actually grab that as well from the activity stream. I'm not very familiar with that API, but you can see all that documentation actually really well enumerated here. This kind of page highlights what is that you are passing in, are requesting back, and then a whole bunch of inputs that you can send in. Max results, published after, published before, and you can really kind of window in on the exact sort of set of items that you want. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting sort of mashup of taking the YouTube API, getting the data back, and then showing it on a Google Apps calendar. Cool. So the second example that we will do is actually a spreadsheet-focused one. So what we'll do is actually grab the data back from a playlist, and then we'll populate all the items for the playlist, and then we'll maybe look at the view counts for it and so on. Cool. So for this, I'll create a spreadsheet. We'll call this YouTube view count. I'm going to say tools, script editor. And again, I cheated a little bit and got the code ready, YouTube. This one's actually written by one of our colleagues, Eric Colita, and I tweaked it a little bit to make it more appropriate for the sample. We do use this internally to track our own sort of videos that we put out. So I'm going to paste this in, put in the API key again, copy this guy. And one thing that is worth noting here is that this is all kind of unauthenticated. All we're doing is the API keys getting passed in, but then there's no user level identity going on.
Right. So there's something that's really important I should point out here is that this is using what we call simple API access. And simple API access in the API lets you do a lot of things that don't require, that you wouldn't require a user to be logged in on YouTube to do. So for instance, you would be able to search YouTube and you'd be able to search channels. You'd be able to use what we call the topics API, which is the way we integrate with Freebase. So you could search a topics and let's say you search for the word bird, right? When you search on YouTube, how do you know if I'm looking for like Tweety Bird or Larry Bird?
Right.
They're very different.
Yep.
So when you use a topics API, there's a sample, one of our code samples shows you how to do this.
Right.
When you search for bird, one of the things may be Larry Bird, and you might say, I want to look for Larry Bird, not Tweety Bird, and we'll return YouTube videos that are related. So this is what they talk about when they say object graph and smarter search.
Right, the knowledge graph as well.
Right.
Yep. Cool.
Right. So that's very cool, and you can do all of that without authenticating as a user.
That's really good. Yeah, so in this example still, we'll be kind of grabbing public data still, right? But the API key is still important because we want to make sure that there's some known entity that we can attribute that usage to. That way we can, kind of meter that and make sure that the service is available for everybody.
That's one big difference between V2 and V3 is that in V3, everything requires an API key, whereas in V2, you can get away with not using an API key. So that's one thing to look out for when you're migrating from V2 to V3.
Gotcha. Yeah. Good point. So one of the things I did when I pasted this in as well is I imported in a library for _ JS, which is a great open source project. And this
you too, huh?
Was that? Yeah.
I know Eric has been evangelizing this for.
In fact, I've actually lifted this straight from Eric's example. So he wrote this great blog post where he kind of explained how do you use it, and he in fact made it available for everybody to just import that in. So that's the library key that you can just very quickly pull that in and be able to do it. And you can do, we'll dive into the code a little bit, but it allows you to make the code so much more succinct. Okay. So I ran the code. So I'll actually manually run it for now. This on open. Hook. Okay, so now when I go in here, there's this new menu item. Nothing too surprising. That's been around for a while. What that's going to ask is, the first thing it's going to say is sync with playlist. So when I click on that, it asks me, give me the playlist ID. So I've kind of cheated and saved a couple of playlist IDs that I'll kind of use throughout here. And these are sort of the musicians at Google videos that we post and share to the world, and also the Gone Google videos. So businesses and other enterprises and institutions going with the Google Apps ecosystem. Okay, so I'm just going to pick that one and I hit OK. And what that's going to do is go and look at that playlist, find out what the items in that playlist are, and load them up. I can sort them whichever way I want to. It's saved the ID here, which it'll use to kind of go and look up the view count. And then it's also a link so that I can click on it and go see the actual video if I wanted to. And then when I click on Update Views, it's going to go look through those IDs, find the actual view count for each of them, and then show it very quickly. So you can see that it's actually kind of a fun way to bring data in, and there's a lot of things you can do with it once it's in a spreadsheet, as in being able to plot it, being able to run a lot of historical analytics and things like that. And it's actually pretty cool because you can just go into a new sheet and kind of do this for the other playlist. I'll just grab this guy, and this one should have I think 30 or so number of videos. And then you can see that at the very end it actually sorts it as well. It loads the data in and then runs a sort function on it. And I'll go and update views. And that update views is sort of a secondary thing because you may just want to update views after the video is already loaded. So you can see that it's actually kind of a nice view to be able to see what the different view counts are. And you can see the one that's quite popular, which is, I think, Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga.
And you can see that one, I believe that's in here as well.
That was a very fun one.
Yep.
I couldn't attend.
Actually there for that.
No, okay. I was going to go to, this is back when I was in the California offices. I was going to go to Mountain View, but I had an emergency meeting in a different office. I was like, no! So I ended up watching it
Well, it's on YouTube now.
Yeah, it was live live stream too.
Oh, perfect.
If I
Excellent.
recall correctly.
So you can watch it to your heart's content, even on your phone.
Yeah.
So that's sort of a very sort of quick and nifty example, we think, of being able to load in a playlist or a channel level set of videos into your spreadsheet, and then be able to look at it and do analytics around it and all the other things. But when you think about it, this is still just gives you the view count, right? That's sort of the only thing, which, really when you go into the UI, you have it right there as well, right? So it's not anything special, right? So one of the things Ikai alluded to was the analytics API that YouTube offers to the content owner. They get to see a lot more, is that right?
Absolutely. It's the same thing as if you're running a website, the view count is like a hit counter, right? It is some kind of, usually it's a vanity metric, and it's not terribly useful for tuning your content. And that's why we have to have something like an analytics API. So a while back, YouTube rolled out this feature called View Analytics, where you can go to a video that you own, and that's the important distinction here. You have to own the video, and you could say, show me what countries people are coming from, show me how long they're watching my video, and show me historically for all time or for a 30-day series what my view count were, how many subscribers I got, how many likes I got, how many shares I got, and what were people sharing through. So it's a lot of really good content for people that are producing videos, like you and me.
Right, yeah, so we put out these videos, and we would like to know how are people engaging with it, what are the type of folks that spend the most time on it, what are some of the localities that we're not serving well enough, and be able to kind of tweak our content and our approach accordingly. So in order to do that, this requires authentication. Right. So, and like you mentioned before, it's OAuth 2.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is actually create, and this is, I think, will be a great example that I think you'll be able to use with other OAuth 2 enabled APIs integrating with Google Apps. So Google Apps Script. So everything that I'll be showing here will be hopefully reusable and applicable in another API that you may want to connect.
Right.
So I'm going to say create this API.
And the scope of OAuth, if you're new to OAuth, it's a little bit outside of this video because it's kind of a hairy topic at points. But basically, one way to describe OAuth is it's like a valet key. It's a valet key for your application. So a valet key, I realize this is like a very American concept. If you have a car and someone parks a car for you, you don't want to be able to open your trunk because, I don't know, I guess Arun that's where you store your diamonds, right? You store all your diamonds in your car trunk, and you don't want the valet to go and pilfer your diamonds. So you give him a key that can access parts of your car, and he can still drive your car, but he can't get into a lockbox. So that's more or less what OAuth is. It's like not your main key, it's a separate key you give out. The difference being you can still revoke it at any time.
Yep. So I'm going to go through this process. So this is sort of the example that I just kind of built out a sample branding. So you're going to leave these URLs there for now, and we'll come back and kind of tweak it. So I'm going to say create ID. Okay, so that's going to create us some an OAuth client ID and client secret. So I'll be deleting this right after this. And what I'll do now is go back into my example and pull out some of the other examples. Let's go down here and grab all of this stuff. It's quite a bit of stuff here, but it'll be pretty easy to kind of demonstrate. I didn't really walk down this set of samples, but you can see that it's actually really nicely written, and you should be able to kind of figure out what it's doing just by looking through it. In the interest of time, we'll kind of skip through that. And I am going to now kind of scroll through and make sure that the client ID here is going to have to match what I have here. So I'm going to copy that, paste that there. So the right place to store it is your script properties, but for this demo, since this is a throwaway example, I'm going to put that right in the code and trust that you guys will do the right thing. And I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, and then great. And then I'm going to actually add a couple of other menu items to my menu list. Okay, so I'm going to say get auth. So we'll just say, go in here, and we'll say do OAuth, which is get auth. And then the next one that I'll add is load analytics. And you can actually weave that in a way better way, right? So I'm just kind of cheating here and and using a really simple method of using a menu item rather than some sort of a nice flow that gets the point across. Save this, run my onOpen again, close this, make sure that I have those menu items there. Maybe I have to refresh this guy.
You have to run it again because you were just authenticating.
Gotcha.
Yeah. See, I still remember my
There you
script.
go.
I still remember this.
Well, hopefully, since I reloaded this, that'll come through as well.
Yeah.
Give it a second. Tools, script editor. Should be there. All right, well, I'll run it for now. Maybe I screwed something up. All right, run this guy. And there it is, okay. And what I'm gonna do first is publish this as a web app. So that is the endpoint that we will actually call back, because that's very important here. Anyone and run as the user, deploy it.
Now it's very, very important. It's got to run as the user.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back here and tell it what the callback is, because it's going to restrict to that sort of known set of things.
Right. And if you don't do this, you will get an error that says that says 403.
Unknown redirect URI.
Unknown redirect
exactly
URI.
What it says. Okay. So I'll save this, and I think we're good to go now. So let's go take a look. Actually, I'm going to have to copy one other piece of information, which I think is important, and I don't think I copied it over before. So I'm going to cheat and just copy this from here into this other spreadsheet. Okay, paste that in. All right, great. So I'm going to go here, and I'll explain that in a second. It's going to say do OAuth. It's going to create a URL.
Already have token.
That's great. You know what? Let me kind of clean that up a little bit real quick. I forgot that I was in my testing. I didn't actually save that. All right. So you can see that I'm storing that here.
Hey, it's cool. You still have all the Civic app stuff in here. Yeah. So what you're looking at is project properties, which shows all of the properties for user properties. That's what it is. And user properties are stored across all users. I'm sorry, per user, but across all your scripts.
That's right. Yeah. So what I did here was just kind of erase my token so that I can pretend as if I'm coming in for the first time. Right. I'm going to click here to start. I'm going to pick the account that owns the analytics, and you can see that that's the icon that I gave it. And it's going to say it's going to be able to view my reports. Okay, and I trust it. I'm just going to hit OK there, and you can close that up. Not necessary. Better error handling would be nice there. And in fact, I'll fix it right now so that when I post it on the internet, it won't do that. Get rid of that guy. You don't need that. All right, cool. So what I'll do now.
So let's verify you've gotten a token. So let's do that again. And if this has worked correctly, it'll.
Good call. There it is.
There it is. Okay, you've got your auth token.
Excellent. So what I'll do now is say YouTube load analytics, and what that's going to do is take these parameters that we have written out here, and then be able to load it into a nice report.
Well, let's do this the way we were doing it earlier, where I can read these off to you.
Yes.
So when you do YouTube analytics, you have to understand that there's a certain combination of things you have to use: dimensions, metrics, and filters. And there's a whole page of these when you go to available reports, and we'll show you how to use this in a bit.
Right. So I just kind of pulled it up on the screen. So there's dimensions and metrics. Think of dimensions as columns and metrics as rows.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to think of it. And filters as kind of a where clause.
That's right.
Right.
And let me actually show you how this looks like with just the ones I've picked up. So this is the window for start and end date. Then I'm going to say I want the viewer percentage broken out by age group. Okay, so I'm going to say go load it.
So what we're showing here is what are we showing here? What is view percentage by age group?
Something was not happy there.
I'm going to take this time to say that I was getting really excited to break open my laptop, which, as you guys can see, is a Chrome Pixel. Now, this is one amazing device. I love this thing, but it looks like Arun's got it completely under control, so I'm just going to put this away. It's kind of funny, but one of my favorite features of this, it's very, very silly, is that there's a light bar at the bottom, and when you close the tab, it becomes the 4 Google colors.
That's right.
I love that attention to detail. It
is a nice laptop, and I really should have done my demos off of it today, but I didn't get a chance to bring it over. I know what I did. I think this needs to be formatted as plain text. So what we're doing there, get my right zoom level here, and I think the format is, what was it? Going back to this guy here, I believe the format is, it has a specific requirement for the format for begin and end date. Let's just
there is. Isn't it year in 4 digits, month in 2 digits, and day in 2 digits?
That is likely my issue here. So what I did was, in this example, just pasted in some text, and it immediately tried to help me out and formatted it, and I'll just go ahead and kind of tweak this in. So we have this example here. Sorry for all the scrolling, but you can see that down here it tells me what the format it wants it.
Right.
All right, so I'll go ahead and fix that. So we'll say 2013, give me everything from the beginning of the year, and then 2013 till yesterday. Okay, I'll go ahead and find my script, hook that up. So all my OAuth should still be applicable, right? I'm going to run this, hook that up, and say load analytics.
So you don't actually have to run that again. So the menu item will always dynamically call the newest version of that script in there. This is one thing I discovered by accident when I was debugging.
That must have been it.
Yeah.
But there it is. So you can see that very quickly some interesting data got loaded up, and that's actually kind of useful for me to know. So what I can also do then is say, let's change it to a different dimension of gender, right?
This should be interesting.
Yep, load analytics. And that's going to say this is the viewer percentage across all different.
So what is this? 89% male, 10% female.
That's actually, as you'd expected, but we're doing a lot of work to make that a lot more interesting and better with Google developers.
Yeah, I've seen the Women in Tech show. It's a very good show.
And I can actually add in some interesting filters. I can say country. Let's just say Italy. I think I'm missing an R there. And now if I say load analytics.
Now this becomes really interesting, because now we can see, are we doing better or worse with women in Italy and men in Italy?
And you can see that, you can slice and dice that here, and all that's just getting, and we went with a really simple approach of just kind of adding it to a spreadsheet. But you can, as you can imagine, if you build a nice UI around this and have these available as inputs in a nice UI app or HTML service, you can do a lot of really interesting things. And we talked about this a little bit before. One of the benefits of having this in a spreadsheet is being able to do this. The zoom level is not agreeing with me here. Oh, not that.
It's also,
I think I selected a.
We want to pick not all those rows.
Yep.
And this will create a chart, which is really nice. What are we doing here?
It's not happy with something here. Well, we'll just pick this guy, see if that is happier. Something a little bit more succinct. Oh, you know why? Because the formatting is it doesn't know what the formats are, which is okay. You can see that it should be able to do
a pie chart, yeah.
Oh, it's not what I want to do. Doesn't like that. I think it's because I've changed the type, but you get the idea. I should be able to copy this over. Let's see if that picks it up here.
And this is one thing we mentioned on the Google Analytics show we did a couple of months ago, which is the nice thing about building this into AppScript is that if you type number, you want to go ahead and change the type to number.
Thought when I copy pasted it should change it, but
not always.
Let's just say normal.
So is that you can grant access to a wider group of people for your analytics that you may not want access to your YouTube channel.
Right. Yep.
So if I give you access to my YouTube channel, you can do everything. You can edit videos, and I might not want that. I might just want you to be able to read the data.
Right.
So by doing it this way, you can still get the analytics, and you can still make decisions without necessarily having write access.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so this data, cool. As you can see, at no point did I have access to, if I have it run as myself rather than the user accessing it, at no point would I have to share the password for the account or even decide exactly what reports they want to see.
Right.
Maybe the analytics API is too robust and there's just too many options, you can kind of filter it down as this kind of useful thing.
And it's useful too for just general YouTube. You can grant what's called read-only scope. So in OAuth, you have this concept of scope. So if I really didn't trust Arun, I would only give him read-only scope, because then even when he does have my developer key, he can't make changes, because all that developer key is authorized to do are reads and not writes.
All right, I'm going to try this one last time, and if it doesn't work, you guys will just have to trust me.
It's a law of demos. That's what it is.
Yeah, it doesn't want to pick it up. Something is kind of funky about it. But you get the idea.
We'll dig into this later.
Yeah, it should be able to pick up this data and be able to plot it in a nice way.
Right.
So hopefully there was 3 kind of examples that we showed, all of which we'll have up.
So let's expand a little bit more into what some of the other dimensions are. We've shown age and gender, which are very, very cool. But a lot of people sometimes ask us, what's the breakdown by country?
Yep.
We purposely didn't show that on the show because right before the show, we ran the country report, and it goes through every country in the world.
And it takes a while. So let's actually wrap on that, because if it takes forever, who cares? So let's see what the right way to specify that would be. So if I go down to...
Again, you want to go to the available reports page.
Right.
And you'll see all of these. You'll see you have lots of different dimensions and metrics.
So how should I do this? I should do it by month?
We could do it. You could do it by country. And what's interesting, we could do it by country and see views.
Or
we can do comments, and you could see that we also get subscribers gained, subscribers lost.
So let's do country and comments, yeah?
Yeah.
So dimension of country.
We don't get that many comments, I don't think, but what the heck? It'll be fine.
The metric is comment.
Let's see where all these comments are coming from.
Okay. And then we can say load analytics. And for that, you can see that these are the abbreviated standard form. And
so there's Mexico, and CA, I believe, is Canada.
Canada, very active.
That's the land of Dan.
Yeah, very
Dan's
active there. Well, we're actually quite active
US,
as well.
Very active.
We tend to leave either yes or up or down comments quite a bit. And also Great Britain. So useful information, and you can see how easy, once the sort of the hard work is done about being able to load the parameters, you can see that you can do a lot of interesting things pretty quickly.
And I'm curious to see minutes watched on this metric, and we probably won't run that now because that'll take too long. But for instance, if you are a channel owner, one thing that we would learn from this is, hey, all of our content is very English-speaking language centric, right? Maybe we should offer captions with translations. Or maybe we should think about offering local content for some underserved but important developer populations.
Right. So we can actually do that, I believe, pretty quickly. Wow, we have quite a few countries that people...
It's just going to keep going, man. Yeah.
All right, so we'll kind of do that real quick, and then I should be able to do, what is it, minutes watched? Minutes watched.
But you'll notice that now country is an option as a filter, which is the third most column, the third rightmost column. So when you go to minutes watched, we can do, for instance, the last 30 days, minutes watched, estimate minutes watched, and you can filter by country. You see it in the third row.
Gotcha. So we'll do... So dimensions is minutes watched, yeah? Or was it metric? No, metric was minutes watched.
Right.
And the dimension was nothing?
Dimension is, we'll pick like 30-day or something.
Let's do 30-day totals.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can have this all in a drop-down, right? It doesn't have to be this complicated.
Right.
And then filter...
And the filter syntax is a little bit different. You do the filter name equals and the country code. So let's take a look to see how often, and it's giving us everything for the last 30 days.
Yep. Yeah. And you can this is not really sorted in any useful way, but you can see that this is going to give me the minutes watched, and we should roll this up into hours,
right?
Because we're quite popular. Some of these videos are, and you should be able to see what days are the best for viewership and so on.
Right. And you can. What's really great is that you can slice and dice the data and just draw useful information. Google is a very data-driven company. I mean, I think that we sometimes go on intuition. My intuition is that when we do English language content, it will be more popular in English-speaking countries, right? But then again, we really want to see, like where one thing that, again, you could just draw a correlation. Maybe there's a place with a lot of views, but with very low minutes watched, right? And we want to figure out why is that? How can we better tune our video content to serve those populations? So you can do a ton of cool stuff with YouTube Analytics if you're running any kind of video site or video channel. Or there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is that there's something called a partner API. So let's say that you're using the partner API because you are a content owner, right? And what you could do is you can claim copyright on videos, and what you'll be able to do is you'll also be able to run analytics on those videos, even if you didn't upload them. But you have to claim that I own the rights to this video.
That's really cool.
So
I didn't know about that.
That is really cool. Yeah.
So, so I think that we're approaching time, and so hopefully this was a very useful session of being able to take the pieces that are available, and we didn't build any infrastructure here, no SDKs.
That is something I forgot to mention, which is that if you are a channel owner and a content creator, you might not have infrastructure to run reporting. And with AppScript, you have I don't want to call it lightweight because it's very powerful. You have very agile, right? You have very nimble infrastructure to go ahead and build reporting or dashboards for your content.
Right, and so at the end of it, you have a couple examples that you can walk away with. We'll put it all on GitHub, and thank you, Ikai Lan, very much for being on our first inaugural scripted series video, and hopefully there'll be a lot more to come. And I learned a lot about the YouTube APIs. Thank you very much for all the pointers, and hope you enjoy this.
All right, and for those of you guys that are here from the YouTube side of things, we are doing weekly YouTube shows, so developers.google.com/live, and you'll find our YouTube shows. I think we're doing one tomorrow.
Excellent.
And we're talking about, tomorrow's show is going to be, we're talking about WebM.
Oh, excellent! That's a new open standard that Google's behind.
It's gonna be a deep dive. It's gonna be very technical, very nerdy, very geeky. I'm gonna be watching it. I'm gonna watch it over and over until I understand it.
I'll try to join in as well.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.